The families who endured Arctic winters possessed wisdom we've abandoned. They understood how to transform a frozen cabin into a life-sustaining refuge when temperatures plunged to 50 below zero. They perfected methods that maintained fires for 14 hours without interruption, using primitive tools. They developed insulation techniques that rivaled modern materials, using only tree bark, fir scraps, and river clay. And when disaster struck, when flames died, when provisions dwindled, when storms imprisoned them for months, they executed emergency procedures that preserved life. In our contemporary world of smart thermostats, heated floors, and weather satellites, we've forgotten what it required to survive an Arctic night when failure meant perishing before sunrise. How did these Alaskan pioneers accomplish this? What ingenious solutions did they craft from timber and stone? And why have we lost touch with these remarkable survival innovations that sustained our forebears?
Your breath crystallizes instantly as you wake in the pre-dawn darkness of an Alaskan cabin in January 1885. The thermometer outside reads 45 below zero, and inside the Henderson family's homestead, warmth exists only in pockets. Your cheeks sting from the frigid air, while your body remains cocooned beneath layers of caribou hide, wool blankets, and salvaged fabric. Around you, your younger brothers sleep curled together, their exhaled breath forming ice crystals that drift in the dim light filtering through frost-covered windows. The night's fire has diminished to barely glowing embers in the massive stone fireplace dominating the cabin's center. Those embers represent survival itself. Should they extinguish completely during the night, the Henderson family faces mortal danger. This isn't your heated bedroom where heating system failure means discomfort and a service call. For the Hendersons and countless frontier families across Alaska, a failed heating system during winter meant death by morning.
Jacob Henderson, your father, moves with practiced urgency. You hear his boots hit the plank floor, each step echoing in the cold air. Unlike your warm bed, his feet land on boards that feel like ice blocks. He wastes no motion, moving directly toward the fireplace in his sleeping clothes, bent against the cold with decades of experience guiding every action. "Margaret," he whispers to your mother, "bring the lamp." You watch her silhouette reach for the bedside kerosene lamp and matches. The sulfur match strikes with unusual loudness in the silent cabin, its brief flame illuminating her weathered face, determined eyes reflecting years of similar mornings, frost caught in her graying hair.
Merciful heavens, it's brutal, your father mutters, approaching the fireplace with reverence. The massive stone structure dominates the room's center, its chimney disappearing into the cabin's peak. A cracked fireback could spell disaster, no replacement available for hundreds of miles, and temperatures that ensure death before help arrives. Through narrowed eyes, he examines the coals nestled among the ash. The entire family's day hangs on what he discovers in that firebox. "Still breathing," he announces, relief evident in his voice. "Hand me the starter box." Hey, before we continue deeper into this Alaskan survival story, if you're finding this helpful for sleep or just enjoying the journey, please hit that like button or subscribe. I'm curious where everyone's listening from. Drop a comment with your city and what time it is where you are. Let's see how far this story travels.
This isn't casual morning fire building.
What you're witnessing represents the execution of a refined thermal survival system that frontier families perfected through deadly trial and error. Each movement your father makes follows precise sequences developed across generations of Arctic survival. First, he arranges delicate slivers of bone-dry birch kindling prepared months ago and stored beside the fireplace specifically for moments like this. He doesn't scatter them randomly. He constructs a careful architecture over the coals, creating passages for airflow while ensuring the smallest pieces contact the embers directly. "Running low on fine kindling," he observes. "Samuel, we'll need to prepare more today."
That's you. At 14 years old, you're considered capable of handling critical fire management responsibilities. You acknowledge with a nod, though he can't see you in the darkness. The kindling must be perfect. Too thick, and it won't ignite from coals. Too thin, and it burns away before igniting larger pieces. Your father positions his face near the fireplace opening and blows gently on the coals. Not forceful puffs, as you might imagine, but controlled, sustained breaths that provide oxygen to revive the embers without scattering their precious heat. This technique required years to master. The method succeeds. A tentative flame appears, caressing the kindling delicately. He adds progressively larger pieces, arranging them in a structure that maximizes airflow. The fire strengthens gradually.
Rebecca, test the water barrel, your mother instructs your older sister. Rebecca reluctantly emerges from her quilts, wrapping a shawl around her nightdress. She moves to the corner where a wooden barrel sits on a platform, dipping her hand into its contents. "Solid ice," she reports, tapping the frozen surface. "Frozen completely through." Your mother sighs deeply. "Snow melting again today." She rises now, the bed frame protesting as her weight leaves it. The youngest children, your twin brothers at 8 and baby sister at 3, remain bundled together, sharing precious body heat. At their ages, they'll stay in bed as long as possible this morning.
"Jacob, how severe is it?" your mother asks, pulling a woolen dress over her nightgown without removing the undergarment. Layering equals survival. Your father requires no instruments. Decades in Alaska have transformed his body into a precision measuring device. Must have reached 50 below during the night, coldest this season. "Worse than last March?" she inquires, referencing a particularly devastating cold snap that froze their water barrel inside the cabin and killed the neighbors' sled dogs in their shelter. "Nearly that severe," he responds, "but we're only in January. The worst lies ahead."
He builds the fire methodically now, adding incrementally larger sticks, waiting patiently between additions. Excessive wood too quickly would smother the delicate flames. This daily fire resurrection ritual transcends comfort. It determines life or death. The knowledge of precisely how to resurrect a fire from nearly extinguished embers possesses more value than gold in the wilderness. "Samuel, rise now," your mother calls. "We need water for breakfast." Reluctantly, you abandon the warm sanctuary of your bedding. The frigid air strikes you like a physical assault. Your fingers stiffen, barely capable of grasping the clothes you reach for. You dressed rapidly, adding a second pair of wool socks your mother knitted last autumn from sheep's wool your family processed personally.
Outside, the pre-dawn world displays ethereal beauty alongside absolute lethality. Stars shine with impossible brilliance against the black sky, and snow reflects sufficient light for navigation without a lantern. Your breath freezes immediately, forming ice crystals in your woolen scarf. You adjust it tighter around your face, leaving minimal space for vision. The storage shed door has frozen shut overnight. You must ram it with your shoulder 4 times before the ice fractures and it swings open. Inside, you retrieve the snow shovel, a crude wooden implement with metal reinforcement that your father crafted last winter, and venture toward the cleanest snow patch available. You've learned never to collect snow near cabin walls or outbuildings where contamination might exist. You move toward the clearing's edge instead, where pristine snow lies undisturbed. The snow produces a distinctive squeaking sound under your boots, so cold it barely coheres when scooped. This powder snow yields minimal water when melted, requiring extra full buckets.
The morning air sears your lungs with each inhalation. Your fingers, despite mittens, begin aching after mere minutes. You work swiftly, filling the wooden bucket with clean snow, compacting it, then adding more until it towers high. When you return to the cabin, the fire has begun warming the space nearest the fireplace. Your father has added the first substantial logs, arranging them carefully to establish a coal bed for duration. The stone fireback pings and creaks as it heats and expands. "Excellent work," your mother says, accepting the snow bucket. She positions it close enough to the fire for melting, but distant enough to prevent dangerous steam bursts that could crack the stones. "Now assist your father with larger logs while I prepare breakfast." Your father stands at the indoor wood supply, a precisely organized arrangement of split logs categorized by size and wood type. This interior stockpile results from months of preparation. Trees felled during spring, split and stacked through summer and fall, then the finest pieces brought inside to remain dry during winter.
"We need spruce for the main morning fire," he explains, "though you already understand this. Pine burns too rapidly and intensely, good for starting, but not sustaining. Birch works best for overnight, but we'll save that for later. Spruce provides the steady heat we need through morning. The spruce logs are dense and heavy. Your father selects 4 pieces, each forearm length and thick as your wrist. These aren't randomly chosen. He considers their shape, grain patterns, even subtle weight differences indicating moisture content. "Remember, Samuel," he says, handing you a log, "we're not simply building a fire. We're constructing a heat system that must function flawlessly every time. No margin for error exists here. A poorly constructed fire might burn too rapidly, wasting precious wood, or worse, extinguish while everyone works outside, allowing the cabin to freeze. By afternoon, it would become uninhabitable."
Rebecca has arranged the small folding table near the fireplace and helps her mother prepare breakfast. The menu rarely varies in winter. Oatmeal porridge, occasionally with maple syrup if supplies permit, and coffee for adults. On exceptional days, there might be preserved fish or dried meat, but protein is carefully rationed during the coldest months. The younger children wake now, still bundled, but sitting upright, waiting for the cabin to warm sufficiently before venturing from their quilts. 8-year-old Thomas has his arm wrapped around the family dog, a large husky named Nanook, who sleeps with the children during winter nights, providing additional warmth. "Mama, the cold makes my ears hurt," complains his twin brother Daniel. "Stay covered a bit longer," your mother replies. "It'll warm soon enough." 3-year-old Martha doesn't complain. She simply burrows deeper into bedding, only her eyes and forehead visible above the covers. Your father returns to the fireplace carrying the spruce logs. He opens the fire screen carefully, examines the flames with expert assessment, then places the first log precisely where it will ignite best without disrupting existing combustion. The fire hisses and snaps as the new wood begins heating. "Perfect," he murmurs, more to himself than anyone else. He closes the screen and adjusts the damper, a critical component controlling airflow and burn rate. Too open, and fire burns excessively fast. Too closed, and it might smolder, producing dangerous smoke. Your mother has placed a cast iron pot atop the fireplace grate, filled with snow you collected. It's already beginning to melt, transforming first to slush, then water. Beside it sit a coffee pot and larger pot for oatmeal. Nothing wastes energy. The same fire heating the cabin, cooks food, and melts snow for drinking, cooking, and minimal washing possible during the coldest days. "Samuel, inspect the window coverings," your father instructs. "Ensure they're properly secured."
Each window has been winterized with multiple protection layers. First, cloth strips stuffed into gaps around frames. Then, oiled paper covers the glass. Improvised insulation, allowing some light while reducing heat loss. Finally, heavy blankets hang over each window, further trapping interior heat. You examine each window, ensuring blankets hang properly and cloth hasn't fallen out. At the south-facing window, you lift the blanket momentarily to peer outside. The first hint of dawn appears, a subtle lightening of the black sky. "Sun's approaching," you report. "Good," your father responds. "We have firewood to cut today, and I prefer not working in darkness."
The fire burns vigorously now. The fire back is heated sufficiently that snow in the pot melts rapidly. Your mother stirs oatmeal into the pot with a wooden spoon, creating the porridge that will provide calories needed for cold weather work. The cabin, so frigid 30 minutes ago, begins warming within a 6-foot radius of the fireplace. The temperature difference is dramatic. You can actually observe the boundary where warm air meets cold, like a shimmering, invisible barrier. Your mother notices as well. "Rebecca, bring Martha to the warm side now. Keep her feet covered." Rebecca retrieves the toddler, maintaining her wrapping in a small quilt, and brings her near the fireplace. The little girl's face, pinched with cold, relaxes as she feels the warmth. "Jacob, don't forget we're low on kerosene," your mother mentions while working. "If this cold continues, we'll have no light by week's end." Your father nods grimly. "I know. I'm hoping to reach town before the next storm, but those clouds look threatening."
This represents winter survival reality.
constant calculation of supplies, weather, and needs. Every decision carries enormous weight. Travel to town for supplies and risk storm entrapment, or remain home and risk running out of essentials. Cut additional firewood today, or repair the loose chinking in the west wall. Each choice could determine life or death. The cabin has reached what passes for warmth during an Alaskan winter morning, perhaps 50 degrees near the fireplace, still freezing near walls. Frost on interior walls hasn't melted. It simply glistens in growing firelight. "Breakfast ready," your mother announces. The family gathers around the small table, except your father, who takes his bowl to the door. "I need to check the animals," he says, pulling on his heavy coat, a fur-lined leather garment reaching his knees. "It's too dangerous for them in the lean-to," your mother protests. "Bring the chickens inside."
He shakes his head. "The sled dogs are well wrapped in the kennel. I banked extra straw around the walls last night. Chickens might need to come in, though." With that, he opens the door and steps outside, admitting a blast of Arctic air that cuts through the cabin's hard-won warmth. He closes it quickly behind him. The rest consume breakfast rapidly, the hot oatmeal warming from within. Conversation during winter meals wastes heat and time. Every calorie matters. Every moment of cold exposure requires energy the body needs for survival. "Samuel, when finished, help me prepare the heated stones," your mother says between bites. Heated stones represent another crucial element of frontier thermal management. Fist-sized rocks collected from the riverbed during summer remain near the fireplace throughout winter. During the day, they absorb fire heat. At night, wrapped in cloth and placed in beds, they provide hours of gentle warmth.
You select 6 stones from beside the fireplace, using cloth to protect your hands from their heat. They're almost too hot to handle. Perfect temperature. They'll maintain warmth until midday if properly wrapped. Your mother expertly bundles each stone in multiple fabric layers. First, thin cotton cloth that withstands direct heat, then wool scraps for insulation. Finally, pieces of old blanket to secure everything. She fastens each bundle with cord. Place these in the children's beds, she instructs. One at each bed's foot under the covers, but not touching skin directly. You position the heated stones as directed, carefully tucking them beneath covers. Within minutes, the bedding will capture their warmth, creating heat pockets lasting hours. The door opens again, and your father returns carrying a wooden crate of chickens. The birds remain unusually quiet, subdued by cold.
"It's severe out there," he reports, setting the crate in the corner farthest from sleeping areas. "The thermometer on the kennel wall shattered during the night. Glass exploded from the cold." Your mother looks up sharply. "And the dogs?" "They're alive but shivering despite their thick coats. I gave them extra fish and stuffed more straw around their shelter. I'll check again within the hour. The well's completely frozen. We'll be melting snow for at least 2 weeks, I estimate." This news weighs heavily. Melting snow for all water needs, drinking, cooking, minimal washing, requires significant firewood, adding strain to already carefully managed resources. "How does our wood supply look?" your mother asks, though she already anticipates the answer.
We have approximately 10 days' worth inside, perhaps another 2 weeks' worth in the covered stack by the kennel. He removes his coat, hanging it on a peg where surface frost will melt near the fireplace heat. We must cut more today, regardless of conditions. The reality of frontier winter survival crystallizes in this moment. No rest exists, no respite from the constant labor of staying alive. Every day demands specific critical tasks that cannot be postponed. Your father sits at the table now, quickly consuming his oatmeal, which has cooled considerably during his brief outdoor venture. He doesn't complain. Cold food represents another winter life reality. Samuel and I will venture out to cut wood once it's fully light, he says between bites. Rebecca can handle kennel chores today since it's too dangerous for the little ones outside.
At 16, Rebecca is considered capable of most adult tasks. She nods, though clearly not anticipating the brutal cold work ahead. I'll need to repack the snow, banked against the north wall, your father continues. It's drifted away, and I can feel drafts penetrating. The snowbank represents another ingenious frontier insulation system. Piling snow against cabin walls creates additional barriers against wind and helps insulate the structure, but requires constant maintenance, especially after windy nights. What about the ice accumulation on the roof? Your mother asks. Is it building up near the chimney again? Your father nods grimly. I'll need to clear it before we leave for wood cutting. Can't risk melting and refreezing if temperatures rise. Ice dams pose serious threats to cabin survival. If roof snow melts from chimney heat, then refreezes at edges, it creates dams trapping additional snowmelt, eventually forcing water under shingles and into the cabin. A leaking roof during winter could prove catastrophic.
The sky outside lightens now, darkness yielding to gray dawn. Temperature will rise slightly with sun, perhaps to -30 if fortunate, making outdoor work marginally less perilous. Your father finishes breakfast and stands, already planning the day's critical tasks mentally. Samuel, dress in your warmest clothing. We'll start with roof ice removal, then check animals again, then head to the timber lot. You nod, knowing what awaits, hours of exhausting, freezing labor that must be executed perfectly despite numbed fingers and constant frostbite threat. No room exists for complaints or weakness. Winter survival demands everything. As you pull on your second pair of wool socks, you glance toward the window. The oiled paper glows with first real daylight, illuminating frost patterns formed on its surface overnight. Delicate, crystalline structures, beautiful, yet deadly. At least it's not snowing, you think, searching for positive aspects of the day ahead.
Your father reads your thoughts. Storm's approaching, though, he says, looking toward the same window. I can sense it in my joints. We have maybe 8 hours before it arrives. 8 hours to cut sufficient wood for surviving what might be days of blizzard conditions. 8 hours to secure the animals, inspect cabin insulation, prepare for the worst. Just another winter day in the Alaskan frontier, where every sunrise represents victory and every successfully managed fire means the difference between life and death. Somewhere in your mind's recesses, as you prepare to face the killing cold, you wonder how many more winters your family can endure like this. How many more mornings of frozen water and desperate fire management? How many more days of constant life or death labor? But no time exists for such thoughts now. The fire burns steadily, the cabin warms gradually, and work awaits, survival work, the kind our ancestors mastered and we've forgotten. In your comfortable modern bedroom with its thermostat reading 72 degrees, The pioneers would have considered that temperature a miracle beyond comprehension.
You step outside behind your father, and the cold steals your breath instantly. It's the type of cold that transcends shivering. It makes you question how life survives here. The kind that turns nostril hairs rigid and freezes eyelashes together if you blink too long. Keep moving, your father says, his voice muffled through his scarf. Standing still means death out here. The sun crests the eastern mountains, casting long blue shadows across pristine snow. Despite sunlight, temperature remains well below zero. You can tell by how snow squeaks beneath your boots, that particular high-pitched sound occurring only in extreme cold. Your father hands you a wooden snow rake, a homemade tool with long handle and flat wooden blade. Start on the east corner while I examine the chimney, he instructs. You begin scraping at the roof edge where dangerous ice dams have formed. It's back-breaking work, reaching upward with the heavy rake to pull down accumulated snow and ice. Your fingers, despite double mittens, begin aching within minutes.
On the cabin's opposite side, your father has climbed onto stacked firewood to reach the roof near the chimney. He breaks away ice with a metal tool, sending shards crashing downward. Nearly blocked completely, he calls over. One more day and we'd have had smoke backing up inside. This isn't exaggeration. A blocked chimney represents more than inconvenience. It's potentially fatal. Smoke filling the cabin could suffocate the family during sleep or force them outside into killing temperatures. As you work, your mind drifts to the main task ahead, cutting firewood. Without steady supplies of properly processed wood, the Henderson family, like all frontier survivors, had transformed firewood preparation into precise science. It wasn't simply about chopping trees. It involves selecting appropriate species, cutting at optimal times of year, seasoning for proper duration, and processing into specific sizes for different heating needs. By the time you finish clearing your roof section, your father has moved to the cabin's north wall, shoveling fresh snow against the base to improve insulation. You join him without instruction. Everyone works without prompting during winter. No room exists for laziness when survival hangs in balance. Pack it firmly, he instructs, demonstrating how to compress snow into solid banks against the cabin wall. We want it dense enough to block wind, not lying loose. This snowbank is ingenious in simplicity, free insulation that can add significant warmth to cabin interior. Your mother and siblings depend on these snowbanks to maintain survivable temperatures. With urgent roof and wall work complete, your father leads you toward the kennel, a crude structure smaller than the cabin, but critical for sheltering sled dogs. Inside, 6 huskies huddle together, despite being wrapped in blankets and surrounded by straw. They're struggling, your father says grimly, running his hand along one animal's thick fur. Another night this cold might finish the weakest ones. The dogs represent valuable possessions, transportation, hunting companions, and in extreme circumstances, emergency food source. Losing them would be catastrophic, equivalent to losing thousands of dollars in modern terms. We'll bring the smallest 2 inside tonight, he decides, put them in the storage corner by the woodpile. This represents extreme measure, bringing working dogs into family living space. The cabin already feels cramped with 7 people. Adding large dogs means even less space and
additional mess. But the alternative, losing the animals, is unthinkable. What about the chickens, you ask, nodding toward the second enclosure, where a dozen hens cluster together, their usual noise silenced by cold. They'll remain inside until this cold breaks. Your mother won't appreciate the mess, but we can't risk losing them. Winter survival economy becomes clear in these decisions. Every animal, every cord of wood, every preserved food item represents carefully managed resources standing between the family and starvation or freezing.
With immediate morning tasks complete, your father turns toward the real work. Retrieve the saws and axes, he says. We'll take the sled to the timber lot. The timber lot is a forest section about half a mile from the cabin. Most trees immediately surrounding the homestead were cleared during construction years ago, requiring increasingly distant trips for firewood. You retrieve tools from storage. 2 cross-cut saws with distinctive long blades and wooden handles, 4 axes of different sizes, and iron wedges for splitting. Each tool receives meticulous maintenance. Blades kept sharp through regular filing, wooden handles rubbed with oil to prevent drying and cracking. Samuel, Jacob, wait! Your mother calls from the cabin door. She's wrapped in a shawl, cold air swirling around her skirts as she hurries toward you with items in her hands. Take these, she says, bringing extra pairs of wool socks. Put these over your mittens, she instructs. It's too severe for just leather and wool today.
This layering technique, wool socks over mittens, provides crucial additional protection for extremities most vulnerable to frostbite. The improvised system works better than any single pair of gloves available then. And take this, she adds, handing over a small tin containing a mixture of bear grease and beeswax for exposed faces. Don't want your skin cracking open. You and your father obediently smear the strong-smelling substance over exposed skin. It's greasy and unpleasant, but creates barriers, helping prevent brutal combination of cold air and wind from damaging skin. We'll return before sunset, your father promises. Maintain the fire steadily. Your mother nods, understanding his words' subtext. If you aren't back by dark, something has gone seriously wrong, and she'll need to make difficult decisions about managing the fire with limited indoor wood supply.
The wooden sled waits beside the kennel, sturdy homemade construction with runners made from curved birch, designed for hauling heavy wood loads across snow. In summer, the same wood would be transported by wagon, but snow actually eases work by reducing friction for heavy loads. Your father harnesses himself to the sled using leather straps crossed over his shoulders. You'll help pull once the sled loads with wood. For now, you walk alongside, carrying smaller tools while your father drags heavier saws on the empty sled. The journey to the timber lot proceeds silently, both conserving energy and minimizing facial exposure to cold air. Your breath freezes immediately, creating ice in your scarf and around hat edges where it meets your forehead. The forest, when reached, feels almost warm compared to open areas. Trees block wind, creating stillness, offering slight relief. Your father stops, surveying available trees with expert assessment.
We need variety today, he says, his words forming thick clouds in air. Spruce for steady heat, birch for overnight burning,
and some pine for quick morning fires. He's not randomly selecting trees. He walks from one to another, examining them, sometimes tapping trunks with his axe back. This spruce has been dead about 3 years, he says, indicating a medium-sized tree with bark falling from its lower trunk. Perfect for us, already seasoned but still sound. This represents frontier forestry knowledge passed through generations. Living trees contain excessive moisture for efficient burning. Trees dead too long become punky and rotten, burning rapidly with minimal heat. But trees dead for 2 to 5 years offer ideal firewood, naturally dried yet still dense with potential energy. We'll take this one first, he decides, positioning himself on one side. Take the other end of the saw.
The cross-cut saw represents engineering marvel. Flexible steel blade with specially designed teeth cutting in both directions. You take position opposite your father, gripping the wooden handle. Remember, he says, let the saw do the work. Don't force it or you'll bind the blade. Long, steady strokes. This represents another skill where precision matters more than strength. Properly used saws, even in 14-year-old hands, can cut efficiently through hardwood. Poor technique can exhaust even the strongest person and risk damaging expensive tools that can't be easily replaced on the frontier. You begin rhythmic work, pulling and pushing the saw through frozen wood. Despite bitter cold, you soon warm from exertion, steam rising from your bodies. Your grandfather could cut 2 cords daily by himself, your father says, during a brief pause to catch breath. Even in his 70s, he outworked men half his age. How did he manage that, you ask, genuinely curious about this legendary woodcutter? He understood wood, comes the simple reply. Knew which trees to select, how to fell them efficiently, how to split a long grain instead of fighting it. He said, an intelligent person does half the work of a strong, foolish one.
This represents more than just story about your grandfather. It's a lesson in frontier efficiency. When every calorie burned requires food that might be scarce, and when every daylight hour is precious, working intelligently becomes as important as working hard. The tree begins creaking as you near the cut's end. The trunk's weight creates pressure on the saw. Careful now, your father warns. It's starting to lean. Step back when I signal. Felling trees ranks among the most dangerous frontier tasks. Miscalculation could mean being crushed beneath hundreds of pounds of falling timber, with no doctor for hundreds of miles and temperatures ensuring death before help could arrive. Back, he shouts, as the tree makes sharp cracking sounds. You both step quickly away, moving perpendicular to the fall line. The massive spruce seems to hesitate momentarily, then surrenders to gravity, crashing through smaller branches on its descent. The impact, when it strikes ground, sends shudders through the frozen forest floor. Excellent, your father says with satisfaction. Fell cleanly, no hanging branches. Now begins real labor, transforming this giant tree into precise-sized firewood pieces fitting the cabin fireplace.
Let's bucket into fireplace length, your father says, referring to cutting the fallen trunk into sections. You position the crosscut saw over the trunk, working together to cut it into segments approximately 20 inches long, ideal size for your cabin's fireplace. This represents another precision example required for frontier survival. Wood too long won't fit in the fireplace. Too short burns too quickly. As you work, your father explains why different woods serve different purposes in the heating system. Pine burns hot and fast, good for starting fires or quick heat when you first wake up, he says between sawing strokes. But It burns too rapidly for overnight and forms creosote in the chimney. What's creosote, you ask, though you've heard this explanation before. That black, tarry substance building up inside the chimney. If we burned only pine, we'd need to clean the chimney every 3 weeks or risk fire that could burn down the entire cabin. This knowledge, understanding different woods' burning properties and their secondary effects, represents life or death information on the frontier. Spruce, he continues, burns slower, creates good coals that last, and birch is finest for overnight burning. Burns slow and hot. Good birch log can maintain coals until morning if you bank it properly.
By banking, he means the technique of arranging logs and controlling airflow to maintain slow, steady burning through the night, another critical skill frontier families mastered through necessity. Conversation pauses as you finish cutting a section. Your father sets aside the saw and picks up an axe. "Now for splitting," he says. "Watch how I place the wedge." Split wood burns more efficiently than round logs, offering greater surface area for fire consumption. But splitting requires understanding wood grain and where to place tools for maximum effect with minimum effort. Your father studies the spruce round, identifying natural checks in wood indicating grain direction. He positions an iron wedge along one of these lines, then strikes it firmly with his axe back. The frozen wood resists initially, but after 4 solid strikes, a satisfying crack appears, and the round splits partially open. "See that?" he says, pointing to the split. "Always work with the grain, not against it. Wood wants to split certain ways. Fight it, and you'll work twice as hard." He inserts a second wedge into the growing crack, pounds it deeper, and the round separates into 2 halves. Those halves will be split again until their appropriate size for the fireplace. You join splitting work, learning through practice where to place wedges, how hard to strike, how to read wood's natural tendencies. It's exhausting work, made harder by cold that stiffens muscles and steals body heat.
After 3 hours, you've processed about 1/3 of the fallen spruce. Your father straightens, rubbing his lower back. "We need to pace ourselves," he says. "Still have at least 5 more hours of work, and we must return before the storm." He reaches inside his coat and pulls out a small cloth bundle your mother prepared. A few pieces of cold cornbread and strips of dried fish, not proper meals by any standard, but critical fuel for bodies working in extreme cold. You eat quickly, sitting on the fallen tree trunk. Despite brutal temperature, you've worked up sufficient heat to feel almost comfortable as long as you keep moving. The danger, your father has warned repeatedly, comes when you stop moving and sweat freezes against skin. "Should we get pine as well?" you ask between bites of tough fish. Your father nods. "After we finish processing this spruce, we'll fell 1 good pine, then attempt birch if time allows." As you resume work, your father shifts into teaching mode, not with formal lessons, but through practical knowledge transfer, keeping frontier families alive. "Fire is like a living creature," he explains, as you split another round. "It needs proper food at proper times, needs to breathe correctly, needs to watching and tending." He describes how the cabin's heating system functions as integrated whole. The fireplace itself with carefully adjusted dampers. The chimney drawing away smoke while minimizing heat loss. Strategic placement of water containers to humidify air. Furniture arrangement creating optimal heat zones.
Your mother knows exactly where to position Martha's cradle, he says. Not too close to the fireplace where it's too hot, not too close to walls where it's too cold. There's a spot where temperature stays just right, and she can find it instinctively. This represents frontier equivalent of modern climate control. Sophisticated understanding of heat dynamics, achieved without technology, based entirely on observation and traditional knowledge. By noon, you've processed the entire spruce into perfectly sized firewood, stacked neatly on the sled. Your father selects a dead pine next, and together you fell it and cut it into sections. Pine splits significantly easier than spruce, and work proceeds quickly. And so, the longest winter of their lives began to fade into memory, like mist rising from a thawing river. By late March, the light lingered longer in the sky. At first, just minutes, then an hour, then longer still. What was once a bleak and endless dusk now bloomed into golden evenings. Snow melt trickled from the rooftops, whispering secrets of spring. The small frontier cabin, weathered, patched, and proud, stood tall against the retreating cold. Inside, the wood walls bore the quiet echoes of their survival. The scratch of pen on paper as father documented lessons learned, the bubbling of stew on the iron stove, the muted laughter of children as they carved new toys from the soft bark of spring spruce. Anna sat near the window, her knitting needles resting in her lap. She looked out across the clearing, where the last stubborn patches of snow clung to the base of the trees. Her breath no longer formed clouds in the air. She smiled softly. Her hands were stronger now, her heart steadier. She had faced the great silence of the north and found her voice inside it.
Beside her, little Clara was asleep in a chair, worn quilt wrapped around her like a cocoon. Her face was peaceful, lips parted in a dream. She didn't stir when the door creaked open and Samuel stepped in, arms full of dry alderwood. "Rivers started to crack," he whispered, stacking the wood. "The trout will be back soon." Anna nodded. "We'll fish again." Outside, the world had softened. The snow no longer bit, it sighed. The wind no longer howled, it hummed. The vast frozen landscape had not changed. It was still fierce, still untamed. But they had changed. They had endured. And the wilderness, in its own quiet way, had accepted them, not with warmth or welcome, but with respect. They were no longer strangers in the land. They were part of it now, like the bears in their dens, the foxes in their tracks, the ravens in the trees. That night, the family gathered one final time around the hearth. The firelight danced across their faces, casting long shadows that flickered like memories across the cabin walls. Father read from the journal, his voice low and calm, a record of frostbite narrowly avoided, of wolves kept at bay, of nights too cold for dreams and mornings that still came, stubborn as ever. When he finished, there was no applause. Only silence, the kind of silence that's earned. And as the fire burned low and the stars blinked awake one by one, Anna pulled the blanket tighter around her daughter. Samuel yawned. Father whispered a prayer. and the northern night, dark and eternal, wrapped itself once more around the little cabin, no longer a test, but a cradle. Outside, in the stillness, a single snowflake fell, then another, then none. Sleep came slowly, gently, and the winter finally let go.